My name is Maribel. This happened to me in 2004 when I was starting my second year at a college in a small Ohio town about 3 hours from where I grew up. My parents were good people, but money had always been tight. They still had my younger brother and sister at home, along with a mortgage, car payments, and everything else that came with raising a family. They helped me when they could. I just hated asking. During my first year of college, I shared a cramped apartment with 2 other girls close to campus. Even split 3 ways, the rent took most of what I made working evenings at a small diner. I counted everything back then. Gas, groceries, laundry, textbooks. I kept receipts in an old shoebox under my bed and knew almost exactly how much money was in my checking account at any given moment. So when my lease ended and I saw an advertisement for a small farmhouse outside town for nearly half what I had been paying, I called immediately. The owner was an older man named Mr. Alden. He met me there one Saturday afternoon. The house sat about 15 minutes outside town, past the last cluster of businesses on Route 12. After that, the road narrowed, the streetlights disappeared. There were fields for a while, then patches of woods, then a long gravel driveway that curved behind a line of trees. The house itself was old but not falling apart. 2 stories, white siding that had faded slightly, a wide front porch, a screened porch attached to one side, a small detached shed behind the house. The nearest home was far enough away that I could barely see part of its roof through the trees during the day. Mr. Alden told me the rent was low because most students did not want to live that far from campus. I had a used gray sedan, so I did not care. Standing in that quiet kitchen with sunlight coming through the windows, I remember thinking I had found some kind of secret. A whole house, my own kitchen, my own living room, no roommates leaving dishes in the sink, no music through the wall at 2 in the morning. I signed the lease that afternoon. My father helped me move in near the end of August. He fixed the cracked passenger side mirror on my car with black tape before he left and made me promise to call every Sunday. When his car disappeared down the driveway that evening, I cried for maybe 5 minutes. Then I laughed at myself, made instant coffee, sat on the floor of my new living room surrounded by boxes, and felt more grown up than I ever had before. For the first month, I loved the house. I worked about 20 hours a week at the diner and scheduled most of my classes before 3. I would usually get home around 6 or 7, make something cheap for dinner, and study at the kitchen table. The house had a corded telephone mounted beside the refrigerator. Upstairs, there was an old cordless phone that barely held a charge. My computer sat in a tiny room off the kitchen. It was a large beige desktop with a heavy monitor, and whenever I wanted to check email, I had to connect through the phone line and listen to the modem make those awful electronic sounds before the internet finally came through. The house made noises at night. Nothing unusual. Pipes, old floorboards, branches brushing against the roof when the wind picked up. I got used to all of it. What I liked most was the privacy. I could turn on music while cleaning. I could study without interruptions. Some evenings I would sit on the front porch with coffee and watch the road disappear into darkness between the trees. I never thought about the fact that privacy worked in both directions. If I could not see anybody out there, nobody could see me. At least that was what I assumed. The first email came in early October. I had just gotten home from class. I connected the computer, checked my inbox, and saw a message from an address I did not recognize. The subject line was blank. There were no words inside, only one attached photograph. It showed me coming out of a grocery store in town. I was carrying 2 paper bags and wearing a green jacket I had bought from a thrift shop near campus. The picture had obviously been taken from across the street. I stared at it for a while, mostly confused. There were dozens of people around that grocery store every afternoon. I assumed somebody from school was playing a joke. I deleted it. 4 days later, another one arrived. This photograph showed me beside my car behind the diner after an evening shift. I was leaning into the passenger side, probably moving books off the seat. There was nothing written with it. That one felt different. The grocery store was public. The diner parking lot was public too, but it was behind the building, and employees were usually the only people back there after closing. I called my friend Lauren. She had been one of my roommates the year before. Lauren said, "You need to save these." I said, "It's probably somebody being stupid," Lauren said. "Maybe. Save them anyway." So I did. For the next 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then one evening at work, one of the other waitresses came over while I was refilling the sugar containers. She asked, "Do you know somebody named Mark?" I looked at her. I said, "I don't think so. Why?" She said, "Some guy called earlier asking if you were working tonight." I stopped what I was doing. I asked, "What guy?" She said, "I don't know." I asked who was calling, and he said Mark. Then when I told him I couldn't give out your schedule, he hung up. I tried to laugh. I said, "Probably somebody from class." Maybe it was. There were plenty of Marks in the world. I told myself it had nothing to do with the photographs. That night, though, I checked my rearview mirror several times on the drive home. No car stayed behind me. Nothing followed me onto the gravel road. The farmhouse looked exactly as it always did when I pulled into the driveway. Dark, except for the porch light I had left on. I sat in my car for a few seconds anyway. Then I felt foolish and went inside. The third photograph arrived 6 days later. That one bothered me more than the first two. It showed me sitting in a quiet corner on the 3rd floor of the college library. I had found that particular spot by accident during my first semester. It was behind several shelves of old periodicals where almost nobody went. I used it because it was quiet. In the photograph, my head was down over a textbook. A cup of vending machine coffee sat beside me. There was nobody else visible. That meant whoever had taken it had followed me far enough into the library to know where I liked to sit. I finally made a report. The officer I spoke with was named Ruiz. He was calm and took the situation seriously without making it sound worse than it was. I showed him the saved messages. He asked whether anybody from school had been bothering me. Nobody had. An old boyfriend? I did not have one. Anyone from work? Not that I knew of. He told me to keep every message and call again if anything became more personal. That last phrase stayed with me. More personal. 3 weeks later, I understood what he meant. The next photograph did not show me. It showed my house. It had been taken from beyond the edge of the driveway. The front porch light was on. My gray sedan was parked beside the house. My upstairs bedroom window was visible behind the branches of a maple tree. There was nothing written beneath the photograph. There did not need to be. I sat at the computer staring at it until the modem disconnected. For the first time, whoever was doing this had made one thing very clear. They knew where I lived. I called Officer Ruiz again. An officer came out that evening and looked around the property. Nothing appeared disturbed. The doors and windows were secure. He walked the edge of the yard with a flashlight, but the ground was covered in leaves and old grass. There was nothing useful to find. He asked if I had somewhere else to stay. I did. Lauren offered immediately. I stayed at her apartment for 3 nights. But then Monday came. Classes, work, bills. My books were at the farmhouse. Most of my clothes were there, and I was still paying rent. I know some people will hear this and think I should have moved immediately. I understand that. But nobody had confronted me. As far as I knew, nobody had entered the house. I kept finding ways to explain what was happening because the alternative meant giving up the first place I had ever managed to afford by myself. I returned Sunday afternoon. I kept the porch light on. I closed the curtains before sunset. I stopped sitting near the living room windows at night. I parked closer to the porch. For almost a month, nothing happened. By December, I had started convincing myself it was over. Then one Thursday afternoon, I checked my email. There was another photograph. At first, I did not understand what I was looking at. Then I recognized the kitchen. I was sitting at the table with my back partly toward the window. My psychology textbook was open. A blue coffee mug sat beside it. The photograph had been taken from outside the house. I knew exactly when, the night before. I remembered the sweater I was wearing. I remembered getting up around 9 to refill the mug. And suddenly I remembered something else. At about 9:15 that night, I had heard a light scraping sound beside the house. I thought a branch had moved against the screened porch. I had not even gotten out of my chair. I called Lauren. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "I think they were here last night." There was a pause. Lauren asked, "At the house?" I said, "Right outside." I told her about the photograph. Lauren said, "Come here tonight." I did. I stayed with Lauren for several days and started looking for somewhere closer to campus. The problem was money. Everything I could afford either had a waiting list or required another deposit I did not have. Mr. Alden offered to let me out of the lease if I needed to leave, which helped, but I still needed somewhere else to live. So after several quiet days, I returned. That decision bothered me for years. But fear does not cancel ordinary life. You still have classes, you still have work, you still need somewhere to sleep. January passed quietly. Then February came. One Tuesday night, I got home around 6:30. It was cold and already completely dark. I locked the front door behind me, heated soup, and spent the evening studying. Nothing unusual happened. At around 10, I went upstairs. The next morning, I drove to campus. I had classes until 4, then worked a short dinner shift. I got home a little after 8. I made tea and connected the computer to check my email. There was one new message, blank subject, one photograph. I almost closed it without opening the attachment. Instead, I clicked. The photograph showed me standing in my kitchen the previous night. I was beside the counter pouring water into the blue mug. The picture was closer than any of the others, much closer. For several seconds, I thought it had simply been taken with a better camera. Then I noticed the left side of the image. There was a dark vertical strip near the edge. Beside it was a small triangular tear in a mesh screen. I knew that tear. I had looked at it every day for months. It was in the screened porch. I slowly turned in my chair. The computer room opened directly into the kitchen. Beyond the kitchen window was the side porch. The picture had not been taken from the yard. Whoever took it had been standing inside that porch, less than 10 feet from me. I could even work out exactly where. There was an old wooden chair beside the porch wall. If someone stood near it and leaned slightly toward the kitchen window, they would have the exact angle shown in the photograph. For the first time since the messages started, I did not try to explain anything away. I called Lauren. Then I called Officer Ruiz. He told me to stay inside, lock both exterior doors, keep away from the windows, and wait for them. I did exactly that. I turned off the kitchen light, then the living room light, and sat on the hallway floor with the cordless phone in my hand. I did not go near the windows. I did not look toward the porch. I just waited. When headlights finally appeared through the front curtains, I had never been so relieved to see another car. 2 officers checked the property. Nobody was there. The screened porch door was closed. But Officer Ruiz noticed something immediately. The latch was simple. It could be lifted from outside through a gap in the old screen without damaging anything. There was no sign that anyone had gone farther into the house. That should have made me feel better. It did not. For months I had imagined somebody standing near the trees or at the edge of the driveway. Now I knew they had been comfortable enough to step onto my porch and stand only a few feet away while I sat on the other side of a window. I packed that night. Not everything, just clothes, schoolwork, important papers, and whatever else fit into the car. I drove to Lauren's apartment before midnight. The next morning, I called Mr. Alden. I told him, I can't stay there anymore. He did not argue. He met me at the house that afternoon and helped me carry boxes to my car. I remember feeling embarrassed while we worked, not because I was leaving, because I had spent months telling myself I was overreacting. I had wanted so badly to prove I could handle living alone that I had confused staying with being strong. Sometimes leaving is the smarter decision. Within 2 weeks, I found a small apartment closer to campus. It cost more. I took extra weekend shifts to make it work. There were neighbors on both sides and a family directly across the hall. I could hear televisions through the walls. A baby cried downstairs. People opened and closed doors in the hallway at all hours. A year earlier, all of that would have annoyed me. Now I found it comforting. Officer Ruiz checked in twice, and eventually there was simply nothing new to discuss. I started sleeping properly again. By summer, I could drive down Route 12 without automatically checking every car behind me. I thought moving had ended it. Then, near the end of June, I logged into the same old email account because I still used it for school. There was one message waiting. The sender was different from the earlier addresses. Blank subject, one attachment. I almost did not open it, but I did. The photograph was older, much older. For a second, I could not understand why. Then I recognized my father's shirt. I recognized the cardboard boxes stacked beside my car. I recognized the black tape around the cracked passenger side mirror. The picture had been taken the afternoon I moved into the farmhouse. My father was walking toward the front porch carrying a lamp. I was standing near the trunk of my car with a box in my arms. Neither of us was looking toward the camera. The photograph had been taken from somewhere beyond the trees beside the driveway. I sat there for a long time. Until that moment, I had always assumed whoever sent the photographs first noticed me somewhere in town, maybe at the grocery store, maybe at the diner, then followed me. But that picture changed the order of everything. They had seen me at the farmhouse before the grocery store picture, before the diner, before the library, before I had even spent my first night there. I showed it to Officer Ruiz. There was still nothing in the message that identified who sent it. No explanation, no name, and there were never any more photographs after that.